Hey everyone, I am going to leave you with this quick tutorial video, and this tutorial is going to allow you to essentially create a very simple animation. In this video, I am not going to move the camera, and I am not going to be doing anything too complex. I want to make this as simple as possible so that it can be replicated and we can move on from this point. I'm in Blender version 3.6.1. I will also create a simple version of this in Blender 4.1.1 or 4.2.1. Right now, I can click a general new file, and there are a few things going on. I have my wonderful handy dandy cube. I have my camera, which is in the scene, and there's also a light. If I toggle to this button right here, the viewport shading mode, I will actually be able to see how this light is influencing this cube. And this is important because this viewport is going to be the viewport that allows us to render an image and allows us to render an animation. It will look as it looks here. So if there is no light in the scene, we will be able to see nothing inside of our scene. I just pressed Command Z to get rid of this, or to step backwards. So, first off, I want to decide where I put my camera. In this case, I want my camera to be right here. While you can click on your camera right here, and you can actually change the location of it by changing these parameters in this orange object properties box. Or you can click on your camera and press G and move it around and rotate it, and all those things that are from that first tutorial video. It's a lot easier to be able to snap your camera directly to what you're looking at. In this case, I'm getting to the precise point that I want to be. And in this video, I'm assuming you've watched the first tutorial video that shows you how to use the controls inside of Blender. But just as a refresher, I'm using Shift and my scroll wheel to pan. And if I click on something, I can pan around it by actually holding down my scroll wheel. So first things first, in order to get my camera to my viewport, I'm going to need to go to Edit, Preferences, and make sure that this button in Input, Emulate Number Pad, is clicked. If it is, and I have my camera selected, and I am in object mode, I can do this really wonderful shortcut. I am pressing Control, I am pressing Option, and I'm pressing 0. And you'll see immediately my camera locks on to my vision. Now, I imagine some of you are saying, Duncan, this is a pretty lousy shot. You're clipping the cube. I don't like it at all. That's fine. The wonderful thing is now we can actually change it after the fact. In fact, I'm going to go over to this Data Properties window, which I can only access when I have my camera selected and when I'm on object mode. If I've clicked here, I can move my camera to the side and I can move my camera up. And now that I've changed this value a little bit, you can see that my cube is directly in the middle of my shot. Perfect. So let's go ahead and animate this cube. If I'm on the layout workspace, I can actually drag this up a little bit. You'll see a few things here. One is that I can move my cursor anywhere between 0 and 250. I'm just going to do it to 240. And what I want to do here is I want to animate this cube. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select this cube and I am going to press I. If I press I, or in your case, if you're on Blender 4.1, you press K, you can add a location, rotation, and scale keyframes. And you'll see that this little yellow icon has appeared down here. If I click that button and I open the summary, you'll see that there are 9 values that are added. Those values are the location in the X, Y, and Z, the rotation in the X, Y, and Z, and the scale in the X, Y, and Z. And in fact, I can tell that I've added these values because if I click on my object and I go over to its object properties window, you'll be able to see that all of these values are green. Let's move it now. The first thing I want to do is I want to decide when I want to add some new keyframes. So I'm going to move my mouse over to frame 80. There's a few different ways that I can change where this cube is. I can literally press G and move it around. And as you can see right here, my location is different and it is orange. In this case, I can reconcile this orange by pressing I. And as soon as I do, those keyframes are added right here. Beautiful. The next way I can add keyframes are by moving this to a different spot, rotating it, scaling it, and grabbing it, and then either pressing I or K again. Wonderful. Now, the last way that I can add animations is probably the easiest way to add animations, which is this Auto Add Keyframing button. And all I need to do to add this, or to use this, is to turn this button on. And now if I move anything around, it actually records all of those keyframes. I'm going to move this to 200 right now, and I'm going to scale this in this direction. I'm going to rotate this in this direction. I'm going to scale this in that direction, and I'm going to rotate in that direction. And all of these changes that I've made have been recorded. Now this can get tricky because if I go in and I start to edit something inside of my Blender file and I have this on, it'll continue to collect those changes. So I want to make sure when I'm not animating, I just turn this off. But because we are still animating, I'm going to move this to the last point and I'm going to scale this down. It has immediately recorded that. I'm going to grab this. It has immediately recorded that. I'm going to scale it down some more. I'm going to rotate it some more. And there we go. In just a matter of minutes, we've taken this cube and we've rotated it and scaled it and moved it around and made it do a bunch of wonderfully zany things. Okay, that was pretty bad. So next step, what could be the next thing that you would do? Specifically with the assignment where you're transposing a musical or 10 seconds of a musical sound into an animation. Well, you might be considering amplitude and how that would influence a shape. You might also be considering how light would play a role here. In this sketch, first I'm going to turn this off so I don't end up creating animations I don't want to. I'm going to press Shift A. This is how I add meshes, how I add lights, and all of those sorts of things. In this case, I'm going to add a light. This point light right over here, I can not only change its location, but I can change something really wonderful. I can change the color. You see, any of these parameters that I have right here that are gray, and I'm going to go to this data properties window down here, I can actually change. And if I want to add a keyframe of one of these, I can just press I. And as you can see, this point light has been added down here. I can also press I when it comes to the color. We have the R color, the G color, and the B color. I don't need to go ahead and manually change those, but I can move my cursor over to the point where I want it to change. I can turn this blue, and then while my cursor is hovering over this, I can press I. Or if I wanted to, I could go back into auto keyframing mode, and I could start to play around with this in that context. Maybe I even want to move the light around. So I can go and I can press G over here. Maybe I want it to start over here. Maybe I want it to end there. And so now we have some pretty interesting things. We have some lights that are moving around and interacting with these shapes. This is already getting pretty complex. So after we've created this animation, and I imagine yours is going to be more complex than mine, we're going to want to render this. So there's two different ways that we can do this. The simplest way is not always the best way, and I'll explain why. Let's do the simplest way first. If I click over here in this Render Properties window, you'll see that I can change how many samples I want to add on to this render. And that simply means if I want it to be really high quality, I would make this a really big number. If I want this to be pretty low quality, I would make this a pretty small number. I don't need this to be high quality right now. I am just doing this as a demonstrative example. So I've clicked on the Render Properties window. I've went to the sampling amount for rendering, and I've turned it to 1. The next thing I'm going to do is I am going to output a animation. So this animation right here. So first I'm going to output and I'm going to select a place where I want to put this. In my case, I'm going to put it directly on my desktop. Next, I can't export a video animation of a PNG unless I want to export all of those PNGs. So I'm actually going to go and turn this into an FFmpeg video. It's just an MP4. And finally, not in color management, but in encoding, I'm going to change this from Matroska to MPEG4. This is a lot of settings. The important thing is this. This is where I am dictating where my file will go and what file format it will come out as. That's the important thing to remember here. And you can tell because this output properties window has a little printer next to it. So the printer is dictating how it is going to be output and what file format it is going to be in, and also where we're going to put it. So once I've done that, all I need to do is go up to render and say render animation. And in this case, because I've made this a particularly low sample rate, you'll be able to watch this unfold really quickly. Now, if you have a lot of things going on in your scene, and you're trying to make this more high definition, it will take longer. And that's why you would often default to exporting a variety of images and then taping all those images together, so even if it crashes halfway through, you still have half of your project. And you can follow up on how to do that with the tutorial video, which I believe is tutorial video 14. I'm not going to include how to do that right now. Now, let me go to my desktop and let me see what this looks like. Where did I put it? Here we go. Wonderful. Great work. So hopefully this video will consolidate a little bit more of the information you need in order to work in Blender. From now on, I'll only give you videos like this, and I will not rely on you decoding from that large anthology of tutorials. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. And I will see everybody on Monday. Bye.